Hi everybody, in this video we are going to have a look at a bit of a review of probability, and we're going to start with some important vocabulary, some words that we'll use in this unit. Let's imagine that we're flipping a coin and we flip this coin a whole number of times. So the first time we flip it we might get a head, the second time we might get another head, and then a tail, a tail, a tail, and then one more with a head. Now, if we're going to use some of these words to describe what's happening. One trial would be just one of these flips. So the first trial gave us a head on our coin. So a trial is just one test, one flip of a coin, one roll of a dice, or one survey question. Now, if we're talking about sample space is just all the possible different things that could happen. So if you flip a coin, there are really only two different possibilities. The possibilities are flipping and getting a head and then getting a tail. So I've just written down the total sample space, all the different possibilities. If we're talking about rolling a dice, then our sample space would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. They're all the possible outcomes that you could possibly get if you're rolling a regular dice. Now, if I was to run my own little experiment and I wanted to see what happens if I roll a 6-sided dice, then an outcome is just what happens when I roll that dice. So I might roll a dice and the first time I get a 4. That is one outcome. I might roll it again and the next time I get a 2. That's another outcome. So an outcome is what happens when you conduct a trial. So it's what happens when you roll a dice. It's what happens when you flip a coin. Now, an event is just a collection of all the favourable outcomes, or all the outcomes that we want. So for example, if I roll a dice 6 times, I might get a 2, a 4, a 1, a 3, a 5, and a 2. So I might be interested in the event where all even numbers are shown. So that would mean the 2, the 4, and this last 2. So the event is all even numbers. I might be interested in a different event, maybe multiples of 3. Well, in this case, there's only one number that matches this particular event, and that's 3. So an event just describes the favourable outcomes, or it describes the thing that you want to see happening. And lastly, equally likely. So when things are equally likely to happen, it means the chance that they happen are the same. So if I flip a coin, there's just as much chance that I would get a head on the coin as there is if I would get a tail. Same with the dice. Normally, if it's a stock standard fair dice, then rolling a 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, they all have the same equal chance of happening. Now, that might not be the case if you tamper with the dice and make one of the sides more heavy, but in these two examples, they're all equally likely to happen. Now, when we describe chance, we can describe it in a few different ways. We can describe it using words like certain. We can describe it using fractions, and we can also describe it using numbers between 0 and 1. So let's have a look at each of these. So our probability scale starts from impossible. That just means there is no way that it can happen at all. Definitely can't happen, all the way to certain. Certain means it definitely will happen. Absolutely 100% guaranteed to happen. So impossible and certain. Now, there are words that we can use in between these things to describe what happens. An even chance of something happening just means that it's just as likely to happen as it is just as not likely to happen. So an example of this could be flipping a coin that we spoke about before. So flipping a head or a tail, there's an even chance. It's the same chance. We can say that something is likely to happen So it's not guaranteed, it's not certain, but it's definitely more than even. And we can also say that something is unlikely to happen. So it's not impossible, but the chance of it happening isn't very likely. So we've got impossible, unlikely, even, likely, and certain. Now we can also use numbers to describe these things. So you'll notice that this scale starts at 0. So if we are expressing our chances as numbers between 1 and 0, 0 means it's impossible. Definitely can't happen, no way, no chance. A 1 means it's guaranteed, it's certain, it definitely will happen. 0.5 is right in the middle, so it means there's an even chance that this thing is happening. And then we have a whole bunch of numbers in between. So if we're to talk about an example, and we might say the probability that it will rain in July, we might say that this is a 0.8 probability. So it's not guaranteed, because that would be 1, but it's a bit more than halfway. So it's likely. So it's over here. So it's the chance that it will rain in July. Now we can also use fractions. So you can see that there's a fraction equivalent shown here, 8 out of 10. So a fraction that represents a whole, so 10 out of 10 would be certain. A fraction that represents nothing, 0 out of 10 would be impossible. And a fraction that represents half, so 5 out of 10, for example, could mean an even chance. Let's have a look at a few other examples. So the probability that you will learn maths in year 10, well, at our school, that's a certainty that definitely will happen. So that's a probability of 1. So 1 means it definitely will happen. Now, what is the chance, or what is the probability that it's going to rain marshmallows today? Well, that's a 0 chance, so it's impossible. It won't rain marshmallows today. There is no way that that's going to happen at all.